The combined contribution of other regions, Africa, the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Middle East, and South America, also declined somewhat but remains positive. An important driving force behind these changes is the decoupling between China and the United States, resulting from tariffs that now exceed 100%. The disruption in US-China trade is expected to trigger significant trade diversion, raising concerns among third markets about increased competition from China. As trade is redirected, Chinese exports are projected to rise by 4 to 9% across all regions outside North America. At the same time, US imports from China are expected to fall sharply in sectors such as textiles, apparel, and electrical equipment, creating new export opportunities for other suppliers. This could present an opening for some least developed countries to expand their exports to the US market, at least with the current pause on reciprocal tariffs. Services trade, while not directly subject to tariffs, is also expected to be adversely affected. Declines in goods trade will reduce demand for related services such as transport and logistics, while broader economic uncertainty is expected to dampen demand for travel and investment-related services. As a result, the volume of global services trade, and I should stress it's the volume, not the value, is now forecast to grow by 4.0% in 2025 and 4.1% in 2026, well below the baseline projections of 5.1% and 4.8% without the tariff changes. These figures are part of a new element in our analysis. For the first time, this report includes projections for commercial services trade, complementing our long-standing merchandise trade estimates. The broader economic picture is also affected. We now expect world GDP to grow by 2.2% in 2025, 0.6 percentage points below the baseline, before recovering slightly to 2.4% in 2026. The largest impact will again be in North America, where growth is projected to slow by 1.6 percentage points, followed by Asia and South America. While reciprocal tariffs alone would have limited effect on global GDP, a wider spread of trade policy uncertainty could nearly double the projected GDP loss, bringing it to 1.1 percentage points below the baseline. All of this follows a notably strong year for trade. In 2024, the volume of world merchandise trade grew by 2.9% and commercial services trade expanded by 6.8%. With global GDP growing by 2.8% at market exchange rates, 2024 was the first year since 2017, excluding the post-COVID recovery, in which merchandise trade growth outpaced GDP growth. In value terms, merchandise exports rose by 2% to $24.43 trillion, and services exports increased by 9% to $8.69 trillion, supported by strong global demand. In short, we are seeing a sharp turn in the global trade landscape. These developments highlight the importance of predictable and stable trade policies, not just for trade itself, but for broader economic resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. We'll now open it to questions, and the first question goes to Laurent. Please identify yourself and your organization. Please.
Sure. Thank you, Director General, for the press conference. So obviously, the elephant in the room is the current volatile US trade policy. And it seems that a lot of head of international organizations have tried to reach out to President Trump and the US administration since he came back to power. So did you manage to get him on the phone, or who are you talking to currently to the within the US administration? Are you talking to Ambassador Greer? Yeah, how does that happen? And then a short question to Ralph Ossa. So now you anticipate that the Chinese exports to the region other than the North America could expand by 4 to 9%. If you could give us the figure for Europe, that would be great. Thank you.
That's a question I certainly wasn't expecting. Who am I talking to? 3 weeks ago, is it 3 or 4 weeks? 4 weeks ago, I met with Ambassador Greer and with Secretary Lutnick. So those are the people in the administration that I have been in touch with. And I had, I must say, good meetings with them. This was before the reciprocal tariffs came out, and we were still waiting for them. And I think those are my primary contacts, in particular, Ambassador Greer, the USTR's office. Thank you.
So on the trade diversion effects, the number for Europe is 6%. So Chinese exports to Europe are projected to increase by 6%. One thing on trade diversion, I think you have to keep in mind that this is a two-way street in the sense that, of course, there will be some Chinese exports being diverted to Europe, but there will also be some European exports diverted to other economies. Think about the high tariffs that are in place on motor vehicles, for example. And this is, of course, something that will need to be carefully managed because that's a way through which these tensions could potentially propagate beyond US trading relationships.
Thanks, Ralph. Assis.
Assis Moreira, Valor Econômico, São Paulo. Director Gigi, the situation, plenty of uncertainties. Do you think it's the time to convoke an extraordinary ministerial meeting in Geneva to discuss the situation of WTO and the global trade?
Thank you. That's a very good question. This is something that the members themselves have to decide. As you know, WTO is a very interesting organization. It's actually member-driven. So it's the members who have to decide whether they want to have particular meetings or get-togethers or take particular actions. And as we speak, the General Council Chair has been consulting with members to see what they would like to do, whether they would indeed want to go for such a meeting or not. So that is ongoing as we speak. And we will get the results when the General Council Chair has finished his consultations. What I do know is that members are talking to each other in different groups and configurations. And they are trying to, one of the very important things that has come out, as I said in my remarks, is the fact that members now more than ever appreciate the stability and predictability of the multilateral trading system and the WTO, the rules that make this possible for businesses to be able to trade with some predictability. We have calculated that in spite of these tariffs, we still have 74% of world trade under most favored nation terms, and they absolutely want to find ways to maintain that. So I know they are talking to each other. The EU is reaching out to certain groups. New Zealand is reaching out to other groups. Singapore and Switzerland got together a group of friends of the system, and they're all talking about the same thing. How do we collaborate with each other to strengthen, and safeguard the rules within the 87% of world trade? US is 13% of world trade, so 87% is going on among other members. And I know they're also talking about how do we strengthen and safeguard that whilst trying to reform those things that don't work within the system. I think you saw my remarks. One of the lessons is that accepting that we need to reposition the WTO, reform it and re-dynamize it. And they're also talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Olivia.
Thank you very much for this briefing, Olivia Lepoitebert from Reuters. If I may start with you, Director General, if you could please just explain to us your level of concern following this report for global trade growth and economic growth. Secondly, you said you don't want to waste a crisis. How urgent is it for you for WTO members to use this opportunity to respond with potential reform? And finally, you mentioned that 74% of trade happens under most favored nation terms with the WTO. How concerned are you that potential bilateral negotiations between the US and states who are subject to these tariffs actually could threaten to undermine one of the most central rules at the WTO? And finally, if I may, Ralph, thank you. Just one question for you. Could you just kindly add some detail as to what you mean by broader spillover of trade policy uncertainty? Thank you all.
Well, thank you. My level of concern is heightened. I'm very concerned. for all the reasons we said before, the slowdown in fact, turnaround, contraction in global merchandise trade growth is of big concern. And as we said, if the downside risks materialize, one of which might very well do so, the 90-day pause, if the reciprocal tariffs come back, layered with uncertainty over it, you can see a 1.5 percentage point contraction with both those things. So this means, as you know, there's a strong relationship between growth, trade growth and overall GDP, global GDP growth. In the past, actually, growth of trade drove global GDP growth. More recently, they've been growing in tandem, like 1-to-1. Before it was 2-to-1. So there's a relationship. And so if we have contraction in global merchandise trade growth, the concern is spillover into, raw GDP growth, as Ralph mentioned. And, we've seen that the trade concerns can have negative spillovers into financial markets, into other broader areas of the economy. But I'm also very concerned about impact on poor countries. The developing countries. And we really need to think about that. And the 44 least developed countries, how do we safeguard them and make sure that they are not as hard hit, they are very vulnerable. So those are my concerns. Don't waste a crisis. Yes, absolutely. I think WTO members recognize, you could see it on last week when we had an event to reflect on our 30th anniversary, that a whole group of members got together to say that the critical thing we need to focus on is reform. I call it now, because reform is used so often, I want it to be a repositioning of the organization. And I think it's well accepted. I think the critical issue for us is the modalities, to agree on a process for doing it, and very sharp on those things that need to be reformed. We have to look at issues of level playing field, because there's a lot of concern, different types of subsidies. Members, the US, as you know, is very concerned about unlevel playing field, and the EU. China is concerned about agricultural subsidies. The developing countries are concerned that policy space for their industrialization and growth is not there. These are all issues we have to examine within the reform. Even other processes of the way we work have to be looked at. So I think there's an agreement that we shouldn't waste this crisis. We should reposition it. We wouldn't be here if everything were working very well. And then you talked about the 74% MFN. Yes, the comforting thing is how strongly members feel that they need to maintain this MFN. So the conversations I've been having in these past 2 weeks, round the clock, with many ministers and ambassadors, what has really comforted me in a way is they are sometimes the first to raise this and say, how do we protect the MFN? So we're expecting, as you know, all the discussion on the issues and the tariffs is not only about tariffs. That is very clear. There are other issues on the table that are beyond the WTO's terms of reference in the sense of certain types of taxes, different types of transactions that cannot be handled at the WTO. However, when it comes to tariffs, I think every member realizes that what they agree should be WTO consistent and protect MFN, unless they have a full-fledged FTA with the US, in which case that's all right. But outside of that, WTO consistency, and they're all saying it to me. So I'm quite comforted.
Thank you, DG. Agnes, IFP.
Yes, thank you. I'm here, Agnès Pedro from Agence France Presse in Geneva. Thank you for taking my question. I want to ask you about something you mentioned about the reform. You call for a better decision-making processes. Could you explain to us what do you mean exactly? How this process of decision-making could be better done? Does it mean that leaving the consensus decision making, or does it mean something else? And a clarification on the meeting that might be organized on the previous question. Would that be at the health minister level? Sorry, WTO ministers levels? I was all the night at WHO, so sorry. Sorry.
You know, I think we have to, when I talk about decision-making processes, I'm not saying we walk away. I'm not a member. Remember, I'm the DG. It is members who have to decide how they want to do this. But we also need to admit that the decision-making processes are not getting results as fast as they should. And something, we need to work on this. So it will be up to members. I think everybody treasures the consensus. I'm often proud that the smallest, this is one organization where the smallest member has the same clout and voice as the largest. But it does result in a slowdown in decision-making, sometimes tie up in decision-making. When we can deliver something, we don't deliver it as fast as we could. So we need to tackle this and say, how do we refine what we have and make it more workable? That's what I mean. And I think it's one of the reforms we need to look at. But members have to focus on this and decide on it. Sorry, the other thing was the WTO. What was your second question?
Yes,
Oh,
on the
well,
initial question.
I don't, as I said, the General Council Chair is consulting presently on this, and he has not told me the results of his consultation, whether members want to have the meeting or not. So once we have it, the results, then we will know at what level. I think he's looking both at the level, whether here in Geneva with ambassadors elsewhere, and he will let us know.
Thank you, DG. I will now take a question online before coming back in the room. And I have Tando Maeko from Business Day, South Africa. Tando, you have the floor.
Has he started?
No.
Apologies, I was muted. But yeah. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Tando. Go ahead.
Okay. With regards to Africa, given the current trade policy restrictions and rising tensions between major economies, the US and China, do you believe African countries will be forced to choose sides in their trade partnerships, or there's still space for them to pursue a balanced approach that supports their developmental goals?
Yes. Thank you for that question. I strongly believe that what I hear from African ministers is they want to pursue a balanced development. I don't think any of them wants to be made to take sides. And since many of them are also small economies, this is of great concern. And that is why I stated my concern about the possibility of fragmentation and polarization of trade in blocks. The countries do not, they want to pursue a balanced approach. That's my answer to that.
Thank you, DG. Lady on the left.
Hi, like you, I don't come from a rich country, I come from Brazil, like my colleague Assis. So my question is more focused on Brazil. You gave a great scenario about the situation in Africa with examples of countries' products. Would you also be able to give us a general view about the impact to Brazil, and how can disputes affect the trade and also the economy of Brazil? Maybe if you can give us an overall view, and maybe half if he can, I don't know, give more details. And a second question, a very basic question, but to help our audience to understand. With the WTO appellative body still paralyzed, is it still worth it to bring a dispute to the WTO, or is it better, it's more effective if countries can negotiate and try to reach an agreement outside the WTO? Thanks a lot.
Last and leave the first to Ralph. As you said, I was happy about the way you described it. What is paralyzed is the appellate body. Many don't realize it. The dispute settlement system actually is working. And I want to, so the idea that the dispute settlement system is paralyzed is not true. We are getting more and more disputes. I wish I'd remembered to bring the statistics, but maybe someone can bring it to me quickly. Because I think at the moment there are 41 disputes that have been brought. And we are seeing more settlement of disputes in a more cooperative fashion now than before. So members are sending the message that yes, they still see the WTO as a place to bring disputes, and we have new disputes that have been brought on regarding this particular situation we're in. They continue to come in. That's first point. I think second point I want to emphasize is that one of the criticisms the US made about the dispute settlement system was it was becoming too legalistic. And some of the thinking that disputes could be settled in a more cooperative manner, that the WTO would provide a platform for that, was being lost. I'm happy to tell you that more of that is actually happening now. And many of these disputes are being settled. Members table a dispute and call for consultations in order to discuss it and try to resolve the problems. And very often they manage to do that. So yes, the place is seen as a place to bring your, and it is happening. That's my answer. So over to you, Ralph.
Yeah, if I get the floor, I still owe the colleague over there a question on the trade policy uncertainties. So let me start with that. We have included in our projections, of course, maybe not of course, but we have included the fact that what is hampering international trade now are not just the tariffs as such, but also the trade policy uncertainty. Because of course, if you're an exporter, you're not just concerned about the tariffs that are in place today, but also you're concerned about the possibility that tariffs may increase tomorrow. In the projections, in the baseline projections here are what we call the adjusted forecast and the numbers that I've been sharing. We limit this trade policy uncertainty to trade relations with the United States. And the scenario that you asked about the spreading of this trade policy uncertainty, that basically means is asking the question, what would happen if this uncertainty spread to other trade relations, and highlights the risk that the Director General was talking about, that what is now confined to, if you will, the 13% of international trade, what if this in some sense spreads? But it's not a spread of trade, it's not a spread of tariff, it's not an increase of tariffs in the rest of the world. And on Brazil, so we don't do, so I don't have a great answer for you because we don't do projections on individual countries, but I can tell you what we have to say about South America more broadly. So for South America, we project export growth now of 0.6%, which is 0.8 percentage points lower than it would have been without the tariffs. Imports, we project 5.0% growth, 1 percentage point lower than it would have been without the tariff. And GDP, we project an increase by 2.7%, 0.2 percentage points lower than it would have been. And if you look at the effects, basically what you see, well, North America is most affected, Asia is second most affected, and then South America, and that's an issue of geography, of course, because they're close to South America, is not so far from North America, and trade still follows geography.
Thank you, Ralph. DG wanted to come back on the dispute settlement.
Because we keep the statistics, but of the disputes, but I didn't have it on me. It's just been handed to me, just to cite. And since the appellate body became non-functional in 2019, we have had 47 new requests for consultations. And we have had 31 panels established by the dispute settlement body. And we've had 40 panel reports. Of all this, 27 cases have been resolved, either by mutually agreed solutions. That's what I was telling you, parties coming and settling with each other. you know, there are also 27 that have been appealed into the void because the appellate body that would have been going to the appellate body but cannot be settled, just to give you an idea of what is happening. So the dispute settlement system is very vibrant. Yes, there are some appeals into the void, but there are a large number of cases being settled mutually. And I also want to say that there's, as you know, there's the MPIA, the multi-party interim arbitration arrangement to which some members belong, and they are also using that. And 2 cases so far have resulted in actual arbitrations. So the dynamism of the system, in spite of the appellate body, is there. That's what I wanted to signal.
So sorry, we have to give a chance to other colleagues. Sir, here.
Thank you very much. Stéphane Bussard, Le Temps newspaper. As you know, a Republican congressman tabled a proposal asking the Trump administration to withdraw from WTO. And I was wondering, is the US still on board? And if not, how will WTO move forward? Thank you.
Well, this tabling of this request is nothing new. I'm sure many of you know that with the US Congress, every 5 years, they vote on whether to stay within the WTO or to leave. So this is nothing new. It just so happens that this is the 5th year, 2025, and it's, you know, it happened in 2020, it happened, it's happening at a time when we have all this, but it is nothing new. That is why, what I want to explain. So we will wait and see what happens this time around. I have not had any signal from the US up till now about its position in the WTO. What they've told me is that they're sending, or told us, I should say, they've told members that they're sending an ambassador, one of their best, Ambassador Joseph Balloon. Is yet to be confirmed by the Senate. So I hope as soon as it's confirmed, we will have him here. So that is what I'd like to share.
Yang Chun from China Media Group. And thank you for having me. You just mentioned you are worried about the tariff war between China and the US, but we have seen the latest news that US has raised the tariff as high as 245, so high. So I want to know what's your opinion about this action?
245 or 145?
245 to China. When? The latest news. Altogether, 245.
Percent?
Yeah, percent. Sorry, percent.
145.
245. Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think it, as China itself commented, once you get to numbers like 125, that was one thing they commented that we agree with. It doesn't really matter because it's a decoupling of trade. So this is what precisely I talked about, that we are seeing a move towards decoupling US-China trade. Beyond the 125, 145, it doesn't really matter how much you raise it. The trade is decoupled. And we've already made statements about the risks and the possible impact of decoupling. It's not just about China and US, it's the impact on the rest of the world. If we get this decoupling resulting in a fragmentation of world trade, resulting in 2 blocks, that's my biggest worry. Because nations do not want to choose to be on one or the other. They want to be able to trade within the global trading system. So we have to absolutely find a way to avoid, this fragmentation into 2 possible blocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Didier. I will take one last question and I will go online. Anna Swanson, New York Times. So I was saying I am going to take one last question. Anna Swanson, New York Times, online. Anna, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. I wanted to ask two quickly. So first, why do you estimate that U.S. exports will fall? Is that all retaliation, or is there also a loss in competitiveness from the tariffs? And then secondly, I did an interview recently with a Trump administration official where they said that the traditional economic models of trade, the Ricardian model of trade is dead, that it has been disproved, it doesn't work when countries cheat. I wonder if you have any comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna, for the question and for spotting that the tariffs also have effects on exports. There's a few things going on. You already mentioned the retaliation. So we're talking about exports now from North America. There's retaliation, but then it's also true that import tariffs have effects on exports as well, which is often not appreciated. One direct effect is that if you impose an import tariff, of course, intermediate goods also become more expensive, which then makes it more costly for your exporting firms also to stay competitive. But then also the resources need to come from somewhere. So if you impose an import tariff and you grow your textile industry, say, or whatever industry that may be, the people who are employed in these new industries will also have to come from somewhere, and they will come from elsewhere in the economy, including exporting sectors. And one way in which this happens typically in practice is through an appreciation of the real exchange rate. And that's the difficult part, I think, to project now when you look at the United States in particular, which is also why we don't project U.S. exports specifically, because a lot will also depend on how the real exchange rate adjusts. In terms of traditional models, I think we're using a traditional model. We are using one also aware of its limitations, being aware of its limitations, being very clear of the assumptions we make, and are very transparent also in the report. And I would say one of the issues that one would need to think about is exactly what I already went into, which is the adjustment in the real exchange rate, because in practice, of course, there's also a financial system. There's also reactions to normal exchange rates and so on, as you've seen with the financial market repercussions. So I guess we'll see how this pans out.
Actually, I think Anna was talking about not the actual model for the modeling, but the fact that the Ricardian trade view of the world doesn't work, because when not everybody's behaving, I guess the issue is the market economy oriented. What does that do? Does the model still work? I think that's what you was talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That's right.
So I can also respond to that question. So at least my experience, both here at the WTO and also previously as a professor of economics and of international trade, is that these models do capture the adjustments that they need to capture in order to describe the macroeconomy. Of course, this doesn't mean that they are flawless. A model is always a model, but there's this one really nice image a really nice metaphor that I think is good. So people sometimes criticize economic models for being too simple, and then you really have to say a model that is perfectly realistic is as useful as a map of scale 1-to-1. I mean, the whole point of a model is to boil down the world to essential relationships in order to actually see what you want to see. If you had a map of scale 1-to-1, you also wouldn't be able to find your way from A to B.
Thank you, Ralph. I think we'll have to leave it there for today. I want to thank the DG, Ralph, and the team for joining us today, and for all the journalists who participated in the room and online. And our team will be available for any follow-up questions. Thank you, and let us remember that it is under embargo until 3 p.m. Geneva time. Thank you very much.
3 minutes.